Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I stood in my farmhouse kitchen watching through the window as my brother Marcus walked across the property with a court order and a satisfied smirk. Their mother follows behind, nodding approvingly. My hands shake as I read the foreclosure notice. Marcus is claiming our late father's $50,000 loan was never repaid and is demanding the farm as collateral. The property I have poured my heart into for 5 years is about to be auctioned off in 30 days. My brother thinks he's finally teaching me responsibility. The morning air felt thick with humidity as I stepped onto my front porch, still clutching the legal papers that had turned my world upside down. Marcus stood near the barn, his expensive charcoal suit looking completely out of place among the chicken coops and vegetable beds. He was speaking animatedly to our mother Helen, who wore her best church dress and that particular expression she reserved for times when she felt deeply disappointed in me. 2 years had passed since Dad's funeral, and the memory of our last conversation still haunted my quiet moments. He had handed me that check for $50,000 in his study, surrounded by law books and family photographs. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he signed it, but his voice remained strong when he called it an investment in my future. No lawyers, no contracts, no formal paperwork, just a father believing in his youngest son's dream to create something meaningful from the land. Marcus had always viewed my choice to farm as a personal insult to the family's reputation. While he climbed the corporate ladder at his downtown law firm building, a practice that specialized in real estate litigation, I spent my days learning soil composition and studying organic certification requirements. Our conversations during family dinners had grown increasingly strained as his success in the courtroom seemed to highlight what he viewed as my failure to pursue a traditional career path. The sound of gravel crunching under tires announced the arrival of Deputy Rodriguez, whose patrol car pulled up beside Marcus's gleaming black sedan. Rodriguez stepped out slowly, his hand resting on his duty belt as he surveyed the scene with the practiced eye of someone who had served too many unpleasant legal documents. He nodded respectfully to Marcus before approaching the porch, where I stood frozen. "Earl Thompson," Rodriguez asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. When I confirmed my identity, he handed me an official envelope with the county court seal. "You're being served with foreclosure proceedings. You have 30 days to respond or vacate the premises." Marcus approached with Helen close behind his, confidence radiating like heat from summer pavement. He pulled out a folder thick with documents and spread them across the porch railing, as if presenting evidence to a jury. The papers detailed his claim that Dad's $50,000 constituted a formal loan with the farm property serving as collateral for the debt. "Earl's had more than enough time to make this right," Marcus announced to Deputy Rodriguez, his voice carrying the authority he used in courtrooms. "Our father expected responsibility, and Earl has shown nothing but stubborn pride." Helen stepped forward, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. Her blue eyes, which had always shown warmth when she looked at me during childhood, now reflected something closer to pity. "Marcus is trying to help you learn from your mistakes, honey. Sometimes tough love is the only way." I tried to explain that Dad had never mentioned repayment terms or interest rates. The money was meant to help me establish sustainable farming practices and obtain organic certification. My voice cracked as I described the countless hours spent building greenhouse frames and installing irrigation systems, but Marcus interrupted with a dismissive wave. "Playing in dirt isn't a business plan, Earl. You've had 5 years to show profitability, and what do we have to show for it? Unpaid bills and a property that looks like a hobby farm." The accusation stung because I knew how the farm appeared to casual observers. My focus on sustainable practices and premium quality meant smaller visible crop yields compared to conventional agriculture. The real value lay in relationships with high-end restaurants that demanded organic ingredients, but those contracts existed on paper and in phone calls rather than obvious physical evidence. As Deputy Rodriguez finished his official duties and departed, neighbors began gathering along the property line. Mrs. Patterson from the adjacent lot whispered to her husband while pointing toward our group. The elderly couple who owned the antique shop in town stopped their morning walk to stare openly. I realized this public spectacle was exactly what Marcus had intended. Jake Morrison from the local feed store drove up in his pickup truck, apparently summoned by the growing commotion. He approached Marcus with the familiarity of someone who had been having regular conversations about my situation. Jake's normally friendly demeanor toward me had grown distant over recent months, and now I understood why. "Marcus filled me in on your situation last month," Jake said, avoiding direct eye contact with me. "Said you were having trouble keeping up with supplier payments. If you need to liquidate livestock or equipment before the auction, I might be able to help with connections." The words hit me like cold water. Marcus had been systematically destroying my reputation throughout the community, spreading carefully crafted stories about financial struggles and irresponsible management. Every conversation, every casual encounter at the hardware store or post office had been poisoned by his preemptive narrative. Marcus placed a brotherly hand on my shoulder, a gesture that once would have provided comfort, but now felt like a predator marking territory. "Earl, this doesn't have to be contentious. Accept what's happening and move on. Maybe it's time to consider a real career that uses your education instead of wasting it on manual labor." Helen nodded her agreement, her expression softening slightly. "You have that agricultural science degree from state. Surely there are office jobs in your field that would provide steady income and benefits?" The suggestion revealed how completely they misunderstood everything I had built. My degree wasn't a backup plan for corporate employment. It was the foundation for innovative farming techniques that commanded premium prices in urban markets. But standing there surrounded by their certainty and the neighbors' pitying stares, I felt the weight of their collective judgment. As the crowd dispersed and Marcus prepared to leave, he delivered his final blow with the precision of a closing argument. "The auction is scheduled for 3 weeks from today. Use that time to pack your personal belongings and find somewhere else to live. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The dust from his sedan settled slowly after he drove away, leaving me alone on the porch with legal papers that threatened to destroy everything I had worked to create. The farm that had been my sanctuary now felt like a crime scene. Every building and field transformed into evidence of my supposed failure. For the first time since Dad's death, I wondered if Marcus might be right about my inability to succeed in the real world. Sleep had become impossible. I spent the night pacing through the farmhouse, my bare feet wearing a path between the kitchen and Dad's old study. Every creak of the floorboards reminded me of the conversations we used to have about soil pH levels and crop rotation strategies. He had been so excited about my plans for year-round production, using greenhouse technology and sustainable pest management. Dawn brought no relief, only the crushing realization that I needed to understand exactly how Marcus had constructed his legal attack. I descended into the basement, where Dad had stored decades of family documents in labeled filing cabinets. The musty smell of old paper and cardboard boxes filled my nostrils as I searched through folders marked with dates spanning back to my childhood. Behind a stack of Christmas decoration boxes, I discovered a manila folder that Dad had labeled Earl's Future in his distinctive handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing pages of handwritten notes that he had never shown me during our meetings about the farm project. His careful cursive described his pride in my agricultural knowledge and vision for creating a sustainable operation that could serve as a model for other young farmers. One note dated just 6 months before his death specifically stated his intention to gift the startup money rather than create a loan arrangement. He had written, "Earl has the education and passion to succeed where conventional farming fails. This is not a loan requiring repayment, but an investment in agricultural innovation that will honor our family's farming heritage." The discovery of Dad's true intentions provided emotional validation, but raised new questions about Marcus's legal strategy. If no loan agreement existed, How had he convinced a judge to approve foreclosure proceedings? I needed professional help to understand the financial and legal mechanisms my brother was using against me. My accountant, Susan Walsh, had been managing my business finances since the farm's second year of operation. Her office in downtown occupied the ground floor of a converted Victorian house, and her reputation for meticulous record-keeping had helped several local businesses navigate tax complications. I arrived at her office before 9, hoping to catch her before other clients claimed her attention. Susan's face showed concern as I explained the foreclosure situation. She pulled my files from a locked cabinet and spread financial statements across her desk while I described Marcus's claims about unpaid debts and business failure. Her expression grew increasingly troubled as she reviewed documents that painted a very different picture of the farm's financial health. Earl, someone has been calling my office regularly for the past 3 months, asking detailed questions about your financial status, Susan revealed while pointing to notes she had made during those conversations. The caller claimed to be your brother and said the family was concerned about your mental state and ability to manage money responsibly. The violation felt like a physical blow. Marcus had been conducting surveillance on my financial life while maintaining the pretense of familial concern. Susan continued explaining how the caller had requested copies of tax returns and profit loss statements, claiming he needed them to help me apply for government assistance programs. I never released any information, of course, but the questions were very specific. He asked about seasonal cash flow patterns, equipment financing terms, and whether you had missed any vendor payments. It felt more like a business competitor gathering intelligence than a concerned family member. Susan also mentioned irregularities she had noticed with my mail delivery. Several important documents, including contract confirmations and payment notifications from restaurant clients, had arrived weeks later than expected. Some suppliers had complained about delayed communications regarding order specifications and delivery schedules. The post office occupied a small brick building on Main Street, where I had conducted business for years. Bob Chen, the postmaster, had always been friendly and helpful when I shipped delicate produce to urban clients. His expression grew uncomfortable when I asked about potential mail delays affecting my business correspondence. Earl, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but your brother came in about 6 weeks ago with what looked like official paperwork, Bob admitted while glancing around to ensure we weren't overheard. He said you were having some kind of breakdown and that the family was helping manage your affairs temporarily. The document Marcus had presented appeared to be a power of attorney authorization, granting him temporary access to my mail while I received medical treatment for stress-related issues. Bob, who wasn't trained in legal document verification, had accepted the paperwork at face value and redirected my business mail to a post office box that Marcus controlled. There's a whole box of letters and packages in the back room, Bob confessed. I've been wondering why you never came to pick them up. Your brother said he would handle everything, but maybe I made a mistake. The box contained weeks of accumulated correspondence that revealed the true scope of Marcus's sabotage. Contract renewals from 3 major restaurant clients had gone unanswered because I never received them. Purchase orders for specialty herbs and microgreens had expired without response. Most damaging, several new client inquiries from restaurants expanding their organic programs had been ignored due to my apparent lack of professional communication. Armed with this evidence of mail tampering, I drove to the 3 restaurants that should have been receiving regular deliveries from my farm. The Golden Spoon, an upscale establishment known for farm-to-table cuisine, was my first stop. Chef Thomas greeted me with barely controlled frustration as I entered through the kitchen's service entrance. Earl, where the hell have you been? I've been waiting 2 months for your heirloom tomatoes and fresh herbs. My summer menu launch got delayed because I couldn't find another supplier who meets your quality standards, Chef Thomas said while gesturing toward empty storage areas where my produce should have been organized for daily use. The restaurant had been trying to reach me about expanding our partnership to include specialty lettuce varieties and edible flowers for their tasting menu. Chef Thomas showed me emails he had sent that apparently never reached my inbox, along with voice messages left on a phone number that Marcus must have somehow rerouted. Similar conversations awaited me at the other restaurants. Each chef expressed frustration about missed deliveries and unreturned communications, but also genuine enthusiasm for renewing our business relationships once the mysterious communication breakdown could be resolved. Their eagerness to continue working with me contradicted everything Marcus had told the community about my failing business. The drive home through familiar countryside should have been comforting, but instead I felt the weight of understanding how thoroughly my brother had orchestrated my professional isolation. He hadn't simply filed frivolous legal paperwork. He had executed a comprehensive campaign to destroy my livelihood from multiple directions simultaneously. The sun was setting behind the greenhouse complex as I parked beside the farmhouse, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me why I had fallen in love with agricultural life. Dad used to say that farming taught patience because you had to trust in processes that unfolded over seasons rather than days. But Marcus's attack had been swift and surgical, designed to eliminate my ability to defend myself before I even realized I was under assault. As I sat on the porch steps where Deputy Rodriguez had served the foreclosure papers that morning, I understood that my brother's betrayal went far deeper than family rivalry or inheritance disputes. This was systematic destruction, motivated by something darker than simple greed. Marcus wanted to prove that my chosen path was foolish and unsustainable, and he was willing to commit fraud to make that point. The realization brought clarity along with anger. If Marcus had fabricated evidence and manipulated official procedures to build his case, then there might be weaknesses in his legal strategy that I could exploit. But time was running short, and I needed help from someone who understood both agricultural business practices and legal procedures well enough to challenge my brother's expertise. Morning brought an unwelcome visitor who would either seal my fate or provide the key to salvation. David Martinez arrived in a county vehicle marked with official insignia, carrying a clipboard and camera that would document every aspect of my property for the mandatory pre-foreclosure assessment. His presence meant the legal proceedings were advancing regardless of my protests about Marcus's fraudulent claims. Martinez appeared to be in his late 40s, with graying temples and the weathered complexion of someone who spent considerable time outdoors, conducting property evaluations. His manner was professionally courteous, but distant, as he explained the assessment process and requested access to all buildings and agricultural areas on the property. "I need to document current property values and business assets for the court records," Martinez explained while adjusting his camera settings. "The assessment will determine minimum bid amounts for the foreclosure auction and help interested buyers understand what they're purchasing." The clinical nature of his language made my stomach clench with anxiety. To Martinez, this was routine paperwork in a standard legal proceeding. He couldn't know that every building he photographed represented years of careful planning and investment in agricultural infrastructure that had taken me from novice farmer to supplier for some of the region's most prestigious restaurants. We began with the main greenhouse complex, a series of connected structures that I had designed to provide year-round growing conditions for premium organic produce. Martinez methodically photographed the hydroponic system's climate control equipment and specialized lighting arrays that enabled me to deliver fresh herbs and vegetables throughout the winter months when most local farms lay dormant. "These are impressive facilities," Martinez commented while examining the computerized irrigation controls. "How long did it take to build all this?" I explained the 3-year construction timeline, starting with basic cold frames and gradually expanding into the sophisticated growing environment that now occupied nearly 2 acres. Each greenhouse had been planned for specific crop types with varying temperature and humidity controls that allowed me to grow Mediterranean herbs alongside cold weather greens in adjacent spaces. Martinez took detailed notes about the organic certification documentation that hung framed near the entrance. The certification process had required extensive soil testing, water quality analysis, and implementation of sustainable pest management protocols that took 18 months to complete. Very few farms in the region maintained full organic certification due to the rigorous standards and ongoing compliance requirements. As we moved through the property, Martinez documented the irrigation infrastructure that drew from 2 deep wells and distributed water through a network of buried lines to every growing area. The system included filtration equipment and nutrient injection capabilities that allowed precise control over plant nutrition without using synthetic fertilizers. The equipment barn housed tractors, tillers, and specialized harvesting tools that I had acquired gradually as the farm's production capacity increased. Martinez photographed each piece while noting model numbers and apparent condition. The collective value of the agricultural machinery surprised even me when viewed as a complete inventory rather than individual purchases made over several years. During the inspection, my phone began ringing with increasing frequency. The first call came from Antonio Ricci, head chef at Le Bernardin in New York City, whose restaurant had been featuring my microgreens and specialty herbs on their tasting menu for the past 8 months. His voice carried the controlled fury of someone accustomed to precision and reliability in all business relationships. "Earl, where is this week's delivery? We have reservations booked solid through the weekend, and the menu specifically highlights your purple basil and pea shoots. I've got 3 prep cooks waiting to start garnish preparation." I glanced nervously at Martinez, who was pretending not to listen while examining my soil composition charts. The conversation grew more heated as Antonio described the restaurant's dependence on my produce for their signature dishes and threatened to find alternative suppliers if delivery schedules couldn't be maintained. Before I could properly explain the circumstances, another call interrupted from James Patterson, executive chef at Zahav in Philadelphia. His restaurant specialized in modern Israeli cuisine and had been featuring my heirloom tomatoes and ancient grain herbs as centerpieces of their seasonal offerings. The urgency in his voice matched Antonio's frustration. "Earl, I need to know what's happening with our standing orders. My sous chef has been calling your number for 3 days without getting through. We're launching a new menu next week that builds around your spring vegetables." A third call followed immediately from Sarah Chen at the French Laundry in Washington, D.C., asking about delayed shipments of baby lettuce varieties and edible flowers that were scheduled for their weekend wine pairing dinners. Each conversation revealed the extent to which prestigious restaurants had integrated my produce into their operations and marketing materials. I ended the calls quickly, embarrassed to seem unreliable in front of Martinez and unwilling to expose the full scope of my business relationships, when I assumed he was simply documenting assets for liquidation. My responses were brief and apologetic, promising to resolve delivery issues without explaining the legal circumstances that had disrupted normal operations. Martinez continued his methodical documentation, while I worried about the professional damage caused by these missed communications. His expression remained neutral throughout the property tour, giving me no indication whether he viewed the operation as successful or struggling. Every photograph and measurement felt like another step toward losing everything I had worked to build. The assessment concluded at the main farmhouse, where Martinez reviewed financial records and business licenses that demonstrated the scope of my agricultural operation. He photographed certificates of organic compliance, restaurant contract agreements, and production schedules that showed planned expansion into new crop varieties and increased acreage. "I'll need to compile this information into a formal report for the court," Martinez said while packing his camera equipment. "The assessment should be completed within 48 hours. As his county vehicle disappeared down the gravel driveway, I stood alone among the greenhouses and growing fields that represented my life's work. The phone calls from restaurant clients had reminded me of the success I had achieved despite Marcus's sabotage efforts, but I assumed that success would soon belong to whoever purchased the property at foreclosure auction. The evening brought no relief from anxiety about the approaching auction date. I walked through the greenhouse complex as automatic systems adjusted lighting and temperature for optimal plant growth overnight. The technology and infrastructure represented far more than the $50,000 that Marcus claimed I owed. But I had no mechanism for proving that value to a legal system that seemed determined to accept his version of events. Sleep remained elusive as I contemplated the possibility that everything Dad and I had envisioned for sustainable agriculture would be lost to my brother's manipulations. The irony wasn't lost on me that Marcus's success in corporate law was being used to destroy the very agricultural innovation that Dad had wanted to support and encourage. The next morning arrived gray and humid, matching my mood, as I mechanically tended to greenhouse tasks that might soon belong to someone else. Watering schedules and nutrient monitoring felt pointless when the auction was only weeks away, but stopping the routines would mean abandoning plants that depended on consistent care regardless of human legal disputes. I was adjusting pH levels in the hydroponic tomato system when voices carried across the morning air from the eastern edge of the property. Through the greenhouse's clear panels, I could see Assessor Martinez standing near the irrigation control shed, speaking into his cell phone with animated gestures that suggested an important conversation. Curiosity overcame my respect for privacy. As I moved closer to the greenhouse wall, positioning myself behind a row of climbing tomato vines, where I could hear without being seen. Martinez's voice carried clearly in the still air as he spoke to someone who was apparently questioning his preliminary assessment findings. "Sir, this isn't a struggling farm," Martinez said, with conviction that made my heart pound with unexpected hope. "He's supplying high-end organic produce to every Michelin-starred restaurant in the tri-state area. His contracts are worth over $200,000 annually." The validation felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Martinez had recognized what Marcus and the community had dismissed as hobby farming. The assessor continued describing sophisticated infrastructure and business relationships that positioned my operation as a significant agricultural enterprise, rather than the failing venture that foreclosure proceedings suggested. The hydroponic systems alone represent a $60,000 investment, and that's just one component of the operation. He's got climate-controlled growing environments that allow year-round production of premium crops that command restaurant prices 3 to 4 times higher than conventional produce. Martinez paused, apparently listening to questions from whoever had initiated the call. His responses revealed that he had been conducting more thorough research into my business relationships than the standard property assessment required. He mentioned specific restaurant names and estimated contract values that demonstrated considerable investigation into my client base. Le Bernardin, the French Laundry Zahav, the Golden Spoon, and at least 6 others that I've confirmed through direct contact. These aren't casual farm stand customers. They're exclusive suppliers who depend on his production for signature menu items. The revelation that Martinez had been contacting my restaurant clients explained some of the recent communication confusion. He had been verifying business relationships that Marcus claimed were non-existent or minimal. The assessor's due diligence was uncovering the truth about my agricultural success despite my brother's efforts to hide it. "Who told you this was failing property?" Martinez asked, his tone suggesting suspicion about the information he had been given prior to conducting the assessment. "Because someone provided completely inaccurate information about the business operations here." Martinez began walking toward the main greenhouse complex while continuing his conversation. I retreated deeper into the tomato rows, maintaining visual contact while straining to hear every word that might affect my property's fate. The complainant claimed financial hardship and inability to service debts, but the tax records show the brother just purchased a $400,000 beach house in Delaware. Something doesn't add up here. The information hit me like a physical blow. Marcus had been claiming poverty and family financial strain while simultaneously making major luxury purchases that contradicted his stated circumstances. The beach house represented more money than Dad's entire estate had contained, raising obvious questions about the source of Marcus's apparent wealth. Martinez stopped near my greenhouse entrance, apparently reaching the most damaging part of his conversation. I'm also seeing some irregularities in the estate distribution documentation. The inheritance paperwork has inconsistencies that suggest someone should examine whether proper legal procedures were followed. My brother's financial crimes were apparently more extensive than simple mail tampering and forged loan documents. Martinez suspected irregularities in how Dad's estate had been administered, which made sense given Marcus's role as executor and his access to family financial accounts during the settlement process. The property assessment will reflect current market value for agricultural real estate with established infrastructure and ongoing business operations, Martinez continued. This isn't distressed property being sold to cover legitimate debts. This looks more like an attempt to acquire valuable assets through fraudulent legal proceedings. The assessor's words provided the first official validation that my situation might not be hopeless. Someone with legal authority was questioning Marcus's narrative and recognizing the true value of what I had built. Martinez's assessment could potentially provide ammunition for challenging the foreclosure proceedings if I could find legal representation capable of using his findings effectively. I'll submit my report by tomorrow afternoon, but I strongly recommend further investigation into the financial claims made by the complainant. There are too many discrepancies for this to be a straightforward debt collection case. Martinez ended his call and spent several more minutes photographing the greenhouse complex from different angles, apparently documenting evidence that supported his assessment conclusions. His professional demeanor had shifted from routine property documentation to something resembling investigative determination. I remained hidden among the tomato vines until Martinez completed his work and departed, leaving me with emotions that swung between hope and terror. The assessor had recognized my agricultural success and identified suspicious elements in Marcus's legal strategy, but I still lacked the resources and knowledge to effectively challenge my brother's expertise in courtroom procedures. The revelation about Marcus's beach house purchase demanded investigation. If he had been stealing from Dad's estate while claiming financial hardship, that information could potentially expose his entire fraudulent scheme. But I needed evidence that would stand up to legal scrutiny rather than speculation based on overheard phone conversations. The afternoon brought renewed focus as I began planning my counterattack against Marcus's manipulations. Martinez's assessment provided professional validation of my business success, but I needed legal help to transform that validation into effective courtroom strategy. The foreclosure auction was still scheduled for the following week unless I could present compelling evidence that the underlying debt claims were fraudulent. For the first time since receiving the foreclosure papers, I felt cautiously optimistic that the truth might prevail over Marcus's carefully constructed lies. The county assessor had seen through my brother's deceptions and was apparently prepared to provide official testimony about the property's true value and my business success. But optimism needed to be balanced with realistic understanding of the legal challenges ahead. Marcus had years of courtroom experience and professional relationships throughout the legal system. I had greenhouse tomatoes and the growing suspicion that my brother was a criminal who had been systematically stealing from his own family while destroying his younger brother's agricultural dreams. Dawn brought renewed determination as I prepared to challenge Marcus's fraudulent claims using the information that Assessor Martinez had unknowingly provided. The revelation about my brother's suspicious finances demanded immediate investigation, but I needed to approach the task systematically to build a case that would hold up under legal scrutiny. My first stop was the county clerk's office, housed in a red brick building adjacent to the courthouse, where my foreclosure hearing would ultimately be decided. Janet Williams had been working there for over 15 years and knew our family from various property transactions and legal filings dating back to Dad's business dealings. "Earl, I heard about the foreclosure proceedings," Janet said with sympathy as I approached her desk. It's always difficult when family disputes end up in the legal system. I explained my concerns about irregularities in Marcus's documentation and requested copies of all paperwork related to the foreclosure filing. Janet pulled the relevant files and spread them across a table in the public records area, pointing out several elements that had struck her as unusual during the initial filing process. Your brother's power of attorney document has some inconsistent formatting compared to others I've processed, Janet observed while showing me the signatures and notarization stamps. The dates don't align properly with the timeline he described for your father's illness, and the witness signatures use different ink that suggests they weren't signed simultaneously. The document purported to grant Marcus authority over Dad's affairs during a period of declining health, but our family's actual experience contradicted the timeline described in the legal paperwork. Dad had been mentally sharp until his final weeks, and we had never discussed any need for power of attorney arrangements. Janet also noted that the loan agreement Marcus had filed as evidence of my debt contained formatting elements that didn't match Dad's usual legal document preferences. Our father had been meticulous about legal paperwork throughout his career, always using specific attorneys and standardized procedures for important agreements. Your father usually had Winston Greenberg and Associates handle his legal work, Janet mentioned while reviewing the files. But this loan document was apparently prepared by a different firm that I don't recognize from previous family filings. Armed with Janet's observations about document irregularities, I drove to the bank where Dad had maintained his primary accounts and business relationships for over 30 years. First National had been his trusted financial institution, and manager Robert Stevens had personally handled most of Dad's banking needs during his final years. Stevens greeted me with the respectful condolences that bank employees reserve for family members of deceased longtime customers. His office was decorated with photographs of local business leaders and community events that Dad had participated in throughout his successful career. Earl, I've been wondering how you were managing since your father's passing. He was always so proud of your agricultural projects and the innovative farming techniques you were developing. I explained the foreclosure situation and my suspicions about Marcus's financial manipulations. Stevens's expression grew troubled as he accessed Dad's account histories and began identifying transactions that had occurred after the funeral, but before the estate settlement was finalized. Your brother has been quite active as a state executor, Stevens said diplomatically while reviewing computer screens that I couldn't see. There have been numerous withdrawals and transfers that he characterized as necessary for estate administration and debt settlement. Stevens showed me records of substantial cash withdrawals that Marcus had justified as payments for estate legal fees, property maintenance costs, and family support during the transition period. The amounts seemed excessive for legitimate estate administration, particularly given Dad's relatively straightforward financial situation. I'm also seeing regular transfers from your mother's savings account, Stevens continued with obvious discomfort. Your brother explained that she wanted to contribute to family legal expenses related to your situation, but the amounts and frequency seem unusual. The revelation that Marcus had been systematically draining Helen's savings account felt like another physical blow. Our mother had been unknowingly funding Marcus's campaign to destroy my farm while believing she was helping with legitimate family financial obligations. Stevens printed account summaries that showed the pattern of unusual transactions, but he explained that banking privacy regulations limited how much specific information he could provide without proper legal authorization. I would need court orders or power of attorney documents to access detailed records that could prove Marcus's financial crimes. My next destination was Dr. Sarah Thompson's document analysis laboratory located in a converted warehouse that served various legal firms requiring handwriting and document authentication services. Janet Williams had recommended Dr. Thompson as someone who could provide expert analysis of the questionable paperwork in Marcus's foreclosure filing. Dr. Thompson examined the loan agreement and power of attorney documents under specialized lighting and magnification equipment that revealed details invisible to casual inspection. Her analysis confirmed Janet's suspicions about inconsistent signatures and suspicious formatting elements. Morty, These signatures don't match your father's authenticated writing samples from other legal documents. Dr. Thompson explained while showing me enlarged photographs that highlighted specific stroke patterns and pressure variations. The person who created these signatures was skilled, but they couldn't perfectly replicate the subtle characteristics that develop over decades of consistent handwriting. The power of attorney document contained even more obvious fabrication evidence. Date stamps had been altered using different ink, and witness signatures appeared to have been added significantly later than the primary document text. Dr. Thompson's analysis would provide admissible court evidence that Marcus had forged multiple legal documents to support his fraudulent foreclosure claims. I can prepare detailed forensic reports that will stand up to courtroom scrutiny, Dr. Thompson offered while organizing her preliminary findings. Document forgery is a serious federal crime, especially when used in legal proceedings involving property transfers. The drive home provided time to process the magnitude of Marcus's criminal behavior. He hadn't simply filed questionable legal paperwork. He had committed multiple felonies, including fraud, embezzlement, and elder financial abuse. The evidence was mounting that my brother had been systematically stealing from Dad's estate and Helen's savings while constructing an elaborate scheme to acquire my farm property. But having evidence and successfully using it in court were different challenges. Marcus had years of legal experience and professional relationships throughout the judicial system. I needed allies who understood both agricultural business practices and criminal law procedures well enough to present my case effectively. The sun was setting as I pulled into my driveway, casting long shadows across the greenhouse complex that represented everything I had worked to build. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as I prepared to confront Marcus with evidence of his crimes, but tonight I felt cautiously optimistic that the truth was finally emerging from beneath his carefully constructed lies. The farm that had seemed doomed just days earlier might still have a future if I could successfully expose my brother's fraudulent schemes before the scheduled foreclosure auction. Dr. Thompson's document analysis provided the foundation for challenging Marcus's legal strategy, but I still needed to present that evidence in a courtroom where my brother's professional reputation and legal expertise would be significant advantages. As automatic irrigation systems activated throughout the property, I stood among the greenhouse complex where Dad and I had once planned the sustainable agricultural operation that was now threatened by his older son's criminal ambitions. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me that Marcus's legal skills were being used to destroy the very innovation that Dad had wanted to encourage and support through his financial investment. The morning of the foreclosure hearing arrived with unseasonable coolness that made the courthouse steps slippery with condensation as I climbed toward the entrance carrying boxes of evidence that would either save my farm or prove insufficient to challenge Marcus's legal expertise. Dr. Thompson's document analysis occupied one box, while bank records and Assessor Martinez's preliminary findings filled another. Marcus stood near the courthouse entrance speaking confidently with his legal assistant, while reviewing notes from a leather portfolio that probably contained his strategy for the final destruction of my agricultural dreams. He wore his most expensive navy suit and the gold watch that Dad had given him for graduating law school, projecting the professional success that had always made him the family's pride. Helen arrived separately, walking slowly up the courthouse steps with obvious reluctance about witnessing the legal proceedings that would determine her younger son's fate. She had dressed formally in black as if attending a funeral rather than a civil hearing, and her expression showed the strain of months spent believing Marcus's manipulative narrative about my irresponsibility. Inside the courthouse, Judge Patricia Morgan's courtroom reflected the dignity and authority of rural American justice. Oak paneling and traditional furnishings created an atmosphere where legal precedent and professional credentials usually determined outcomes. Marcus appeared comfortable in this environment where his expertise provided significant advantages over my agricultural knowledge. I had managed to retain attorney David Richardson, a solo practitioner, who specialized in agricultural law and had experience with estate disputes involving farming operations. Richardson was younger than Marcus and less experienced in courtroom procedures, but he understood the agricultural business aspects of my situation and had been intrigued by the evidence of document forgery and financial fraud. Your Honor, this foreclosure proceeding is based on fabricated debt claims and forged documentation. Richardson began after Judge Morgan called the hearing to order. We request dismissal based on evidence that the complainant has committed multiple felonies in pursuing this property seizure. Marcus rose to respond with the practiced confidence of someone accustomed to courtroom advocacy. Your Honor, opposing counsel is making desperate accusations to distract from my client's legitimate debt obligations. The documentation is authentic and properly notarized according to standard legal procedures. The preliminary arguments establish the battle lines between Marcus's professional reputation and my evidence of his criminal behavior. Judge Morgan reviewed the basic facts, while both attorneys prepared to present their strongest evidence for her consideration. Richardson called Dr. Thompson as our first witness to present her forensic analysis of the questioned documents. She testified clearly about signature inconsistencies and fabricated dates that proved Marcus had forged Dad's signature on both the loan agreement and power of attorney authorization. The handwriting analysis shows conclusive evidence of forgery. Dr. Thompson stated while displaying enlarged photographs of signature comparisons. These documents were created recently using writing samples from authentic sources, but they don't match the deceased individual's actual signature characteristics. Marcus cross-examined Dr. Thompson aggressively, challenging her credentials and methodology in an attempt to discredit her testimony. But his questions revealed nervousness as she provided detailed technical explanations that supported her conclusions about document fabrication. Bank manager Robert Stevens testified next about the suspicious financial transactions that Marcus had conducted as a state executor. Stevens described patterns of excessive withdrawals and the systematic draining of Helen's savings account that suggested financial crimes beyond simple estate mismanagement. The transactions don't match normal estate administration patterns, Stevens explained while reviewing account summaries. The executor has accessed significantly more money than would be justified by legitimate administrative costs. Marcus's cross-examination of Stevens focused on banking privacy regulations and the technical legality of his transactions as appointed estate executor. But his defensive questions highlighted rather than diminished the suspicious nature of his financial activities. The dramatic turning point came when the courtroom doors opened, and 5 well-dressed individuals entered during a brief recess in testimony. I recognized Antonio Ricci from Le Bernardin, immediately followed by representatives from 4 other prestigious restaurants that had been trying to reach me during the weeks when Marcus controlled my mail. Your Honor, we apologize for the interruption, Antonio announced as the group approached the bench. We drove from New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. to testify about the agricultural business that's being threatened by these foreclosure proceedings. Judge Morgan looked surprised, but agreed to hear testimony from the unexpected witnesses who had apparently been contacted by Assessor Martinez during his investigation into my business relationships. Their presence transformed the courtroom dynamic as Marcus's confident demeanor began showing cracks. Chef Antonio Ricci addressed the court with the authority of someone accustomed to managing high-pressure business operations. Your Honor, Earl Thompson supplies 30% of our organic produce requirements. His farm generates more revenue than most small businesses in this region, and we've been trying to expand our partnership because demand for his quality exceeds his current production capacity. Additional restaurant representatives testified about contract values, delivery reliability, and the premium prices that my organic certification commanded in urban markets. Their combined testimony painted a picture of agricultural success that completely contradicted Marcus's claims about business failure and financial irresponsibility. Helen's face showed growing confusion and realization as she heard detailed descriptions of my business accomplishments that Marcus had systematically hidden from her. The restaurant testimony revealed a level of professional success that challenged everything she had been told about my supposed irresponsibility and need for family intervention. James Patterson from Zahav testified about the specialized growing requirements for Mediterranean herbs that my greenhouse complex had been designed to meet. Earl's agricultural knowledge and infrastructure investment represent exactly the kind of innovation that modern restaurants depend on for menu development and consistency. Marcus attempted to cross-examine the restaurant witnesses by questioning their business relationships with me and suggesting that their testimony was biased by commercial interests. But his questions revealed desperation as the chefs calmly explained the agricultural expertise and reliability that had made me their preferred supplier. Judge Morgan called for a brief recess to review the mounting evidence that Marcus's foreclosure claims were based on fraudulent documentation and false business information. During the break, I watched my brother conferring anxiously with his legal assistant while Helen sat alone, apparently processing the revelation that her older son had systematically deceived the entire family. When court reconvened, Richardson presented Assessor Martinez's preliminary findings about the property's true value and business potential. Martinez's official assessment contradicted every element of Marcus's claims about failing business operations and distressed property requiring emergency sale. The agricultural infrastructure and established business relationships represent significant property value that exceeds the claimed debt amount by more than 4 to 1, Richardson explained while presenting Martinez's documentation. This isn't debt collection, it's attempted theft of valuable agricultural assets. Judge Morgan reviewed all evidence carefully before addressing the courtroom with obvious displeasure about the fraudulent claims that had wasted judicial resources and threatened legitimate business operations. Her expression showed particular concern about the elder financial abuse evidence involving Helen's savings account. Based on the testimony and evidence presented, I'm dismissing this foreclosure proceeding immediately due to fraudulent documentation and false claims, Judge Morgan announced. Furthermore, I'm ordering an investigation into possible criminal charges against the complainant for document forgery fraud and elder financial abuse. Deputy Rodriguez approached Marcus with handcuffs as Judge Morgan signed the warrant for his immediate arrest on multiple felony charges. The courtroom fell silent as my brother's confident facade crumbled, completely replaced by panic, as he realized that his criminal scheme had been exposed publicly. "This is a mistake," Marcus protested as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "I was protecting family interests and ensuring responsible property management." But his protests sounded hollow after the overwhelming evidence of forgery, embezzlement, and systematic deception that had been presented during the hearing. Helen watched in shocked silence as her older son was led away in custody, finally understanding how thoroughly he had manipulated everyone, including her. As the courtroom cleared, I stood among the restaurant representatives who had driven hundreds of miles to testify on my behalf. Their support had provided the credibility needed to challenge Marcus's legal expertise and expose his fraudulent schemes. The farm that had seemed doomed just hours earlier was now secure, but the family relationships damaged by Marcus's manipulation would require much longer to heal. 3 months after the courthouse drama that saved my farm, I stood in the expanded greenhouse complex watching Helen tend to a section of herb plants she had claimed as her personal project. The morning sun streamed through clear panels illuminating rows of basil, oregano, and thyme that she cultivated with the same meticulous attention to detail that had once been focused on household management and family appearances. The foreclosure case had been permanently dismissed, and Marcus was serving a 2-year federal sentence for fraud, embezzlement, and elder financial abuse. His beach house in Delaware had been seized to help repay the money he had stolen from Dad's estate and Helen's savings account. The restitution process was ongoing, but most of the financial damage had been reversed through court-ordered asset recovery. Helen had moved into the farmhouse guest room after selling her own home, using her recovered savings to help finance the greenhouse expansion that restaurant demand had made necessary. Her initial shame about supporting Marcus's deceptions had gradually transformed into genuine enthusiasm for learning agricultural techniques and understanding the business success she had been manipulated into dismissing. "Earl, the Mediterranean herbs are ready for harvest," Helen called from her designated growing area. Antonio from Le Bernardin specifically requested extra oregano for their weekend special menu. Her transformation from skeptical matriarch to enthusiastic farming partner had been one of the most positive outcomes of the entire ordeal. She now understood that agricultural innovation required the same intelligence and dedication that had made Marcus successful in law, but applied toward creating rather than destroying. The farm's business had grown dramatically following the publicity generated by the court case. Several agricultural publications had featured articles about sustainable farming practices and the importance of supporting local organic producers. The restaurant industry's testimony about my operation's value had attracted new clients faster than I could expand production capacity. We now supplied 12 Michelin-starred restaurants across the tri-state area, with a waiting list of potential clients who wanted access to our premium organic produce. The greenhouse complex had been expanded by 40%, and I had hired 3 full-time employees to manage increased production schedules and delivery logistics. David Martinez, the county assessor whose investigation had exposed Marcus's fraud, had become an unexpected friend and frequent visitor to the farm. His expertise in agricultural property evaluation had helped me develop expansion plans that maximized both production efficiency and land conservation principles that Dad would have appreciated. "Earl, you've created something special here," Martinez said during his latest visit. "This operation represents exactly the kind of agricultural innovation that rural communities need to remain economically viable." The success had enabled me to establish the Thompson Agricultural Innovation Scholarship at the State University, using a portion of the increased profits to help other young farmers pursue sustainable agriculture education. The scholarship honored Dad's memory while supporting the next generation of farmers who might face similar family skepticism about unconventional agricultural approaches. 3 scholarship recipients had already completed internships on the farm, learning practical applications of organic certification, restaurant marketing, and greenhouse technology. Their enthusiasm and fresh perspectives reminded me why Dad had been so excited about agricultural innovation's potential to revive rural communities. The legal battle had taught me profound lessons about family loyalty, professional success, and the importance of standing up for principles even when facing overwhelming opposition. Marcus's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also revealed the strength of relationships built on mutual respect rather than family obligation. Helen and I now work together as genuine partners rather than mother and disappointing son. Our conversations focused on crop planning, harvest schedules, and business development, rather than her concerns about my life choices. She had discovered that agricultural work provided the same sense of accomplishment and purpose that had once made her proud of Marcus's legal career. "I should have paid attention to what you were actually building, instead of listening to Marcus's interpretation of your choices," Helen admitted during one of our evening conversations on the farmhouse porch. "Your father would be proud of how you handled this situation with integrity, while Marcus chose deception." The restaurant partnerships had evolved beyond simple supplier relationships into collaborative efforts that influence menu development and agricultural experimentation. Several chefs now visited the farm regularly to discuss new varieties and growing techniques that could enhance their culinary offerings. Chef Antonio Ricci had become particularly involved in developing heirloom tomato varieties that complemented his Mediterranean-inspired cuisine. Our collaboration had resulted in 3 new cultivars that were now being grown by other organic farms throughout the region. "Earl, your agricultural expertise has elevated our entire culinary program," Antonio said during his most recent farm visit. The partnership between sustainable agriculture and innovative cuisine represents the future of both industries. The farm's success had also attracted attention from agricultural extension services and farming organizations that viewed our operation as a model for young farmers entering the industry. I had begun speaking at conferences about organic certification restaurant marketing and sustainable agriculture business practices. The speaking engagements provided opportunities to share lessons learned from both agricultural success and family betrayal. Many young farmers faced similar skepticism from families who viewed traditional agriculture as more legitimate than innovative approaches to sustainable production. My message emphasized the importance of building professional relationships based on quality and reliability, rather than seeking validation from people who didn't understand agricultural innovation. The restaurant clients who had testified on my behalf had done so because of business relationships built over years of consistent performance, not family connections or social obligations. Marcus had written several letters from prison, the first honest communications between us in years. His messages expressed genuine remorse for the damage caused by his jealousy and criminal behavior. He acknowledged that his resentment about my agricultural success had motivated increasingly desperate attempts to prove that farming was an inferior career choice. I convinced myself that I was protecting you from failure, but I was really trying to validate my own life choices by destroying yours, Marcus wrote in his most recent letter. Dad would be ashamed of how I used my legal skills to hurt family instead of helping people. His letters suggested that prison time had provided perspective about the professional success and family relationships that he had destroyed through criminal behavior. Whether genuine rehabilitation was possible remained to be seen, but his acknowledgement of wrongdoing was a necessary first step toward potential reconciliation. The farmhouse study where Dad had presented me with the original $50,000 investment now served as the business office where Helen and I planned expansion projects and managed restaurant contracts. His framed photographs and agricultural books provided daily reminders of the vision he had for sustainable farming's contribution to rural economic development. The legal documents that had once threatened to destroy everything were now replaced by contracts, certifications, and partnership agreements that documented legitimate business success. The transformation from threatened foreclosure to thriving agricultural operation had taken less than a year but felt like a lifetime of learning and growth. As autumn approached, I walked through the greenhouse complex, where automated systems maintained optimal growing conditions for winter production. The technology and infrastructure represented far more than financial investment. They embodied Dad's belief that agricultural innovation could honor farming traditions while adapting to modern market opportunities. The success story that had emerged from Marcus's attempted destruction proved that family support, while valuable, wasn't essential for achieving professional goals when those goals were based on solid principles and hard work. The restaurant clients, agricultural professionals, and community members who had supported me during the crisis had done so because of demonstrated competence rather than family obligations. Helen often mentioned how much she had learned about agriculture and business during her transformation from skeptical mother to farming partner. Her enthusiasm for greenhouse management and herb cultivation demonstrated that it's never too late to discover new passions and develop skills that contribute to meaningful work. This experience taught me that success takes many different forms. Helen reflected during one of our evening planning sessions. Marcus achieved traditional professional success, but lost his integrity. You built something that creates value for others while staying true to your principles. The farm's reputation for quality and reliability had created a business model that could sustain expansion while maintaining the personal relationships with chefs and restaurants that made the work meaningful beyond simple profit generation. Each delivery represented collaborative effort between agricultural expertise and culinary artistry that enhanced both industries. Looking toward the future, I could envision continued growth that would honor Dad's original vision while supporting other young farmers who shared his commitment to sustainable agriculture. The scholarship program would eventually expand to include internship placements and business development assistance for graduates entering the organic farming industry. The courthouse drama that had once threatened to destroy everything had ultimately strengthened my commitment to agricultural innovation and demonstrated the power of truth over manipulation. Marcus's legal expertise had been formidable, but it couldn't withstand evidence-based challenges when that evidence revealed criminal behavior. The lesson I wanted to share with others who might face similar family or professional challenges was simple but important. Stay committed to your principles, document your successes, and build relationships based on mutual respect and shared values. Those relationships will provide support during difficult times when family loyalty alone isn't sufficient. What experiences have you had with family members who didn't understand or support your career choices? Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was working against your success behind the scenes? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below about overcoming betrayal and building the life you wanted, despite opposition from people who should have been supporting you. If this story resonated with your own experiences or reminded you of someone who might benefit from hearing about resilience and agricultural innovation, please like this video and share it with others who need encouragement to pursue their dreams. Subscribe to hear more stories about people who refuse to give up when facing seemingly impossible challenges. Thank you for listening to my story and for supporting content that celebrates hard work, integrity, and the courage to defend what you've built against those who would destroy it for their own selfish purposes. Remember that success isn't just about achieving your goals. It's about maintaining your principles while building relationships that make the journey meaningful and sustainable. May your own endeavors be blessed with the support of people who recognize and appreciate the value of what you're working to create. And may you have the wisdom to distinguish between those who genuinely want to help and those who are motivated by their own hidden agendas.